talking about substance and the migration of companies. As we have seen already before in some presentations, the word substance appeared. So I give a little bit the background. The whole background started, as so often, in Europe. Europe was not so happy when they saw that Costa Cafe, Starbucks, Amazon, and all these big American companies made billions of profits, but nearly didn't pay any tax in the European Union. And because they had their setups in somewhere in the Caribbean on a small island or in some other jurisdiction. And therefore the European Union said, well, they need to have substance in the form of officers, in the form of employees, in the form of management and the place. This came up in December 2017. Then afterwards in November 2018, also the OECD followed up and said, yeah, they need to have certain standards so that the base doesn't erode and that the profits are not shifted from one place to the other. Then also, of course, the European Union couldn't be just saying, okay, we only charge the big ones and the small ones don't. So they made it very common. So they said everybody has to follow the standard substance rules. That means everybody needs to have some offices, needs to have employees according to what they are turning over. And the management should also be in the place of the location of the company. So this was introduced by the European Union and then expanded to many other places, to islands in the Caribbean, in the United Arab Emirates. They also have these laws introduced and they also have to follow these requirements. So this is a setup which is required now by everybody. And here it describes a little bit the economic substance rules, a little bit in details for headquarter business, for distribution centers, for financing and leading, and very important holding companies. I can imagine that quite a few of the participants here have perhaps holding companies in one of the locations in the famous Cayman Islands, the BVI, Panama, and so on. Now they should think a little bit and say, hey, we have some new rules, the substance rules we have to follow. Perhaps you have not been contacted yet by your provider from those places, but you should perhaps, if they haven't contacted you, check proactively on your side that you fulfill all the requirements. So in the UAE, they did that since April 2019. They introduced these economic substance regulations, and then they gave out the guidance how they have to do it in detail. And the important thing is this applies to all company forms. That also is important for you to know. It applies also for offshore companies. And in the UAE, we have three types of companies. We have companies with local partners, where the local partner needs to have 51%. Well, there I have good news. Just about a few weeks ago, it was been announced that this 51% rule will be abolished, at least for many activities, so that foreigners could have 100% of the company, not only in the free zones, where they can have that already since a long time, but also in the mainland. But the economic substance rules also applies for the offshore companies, be they abroad, be they outside the UAE, the Emirates, also in the Emirates itself. Perhaps you know Ras Al Khaimah, or RAK as it is, the abbreviation. That's one of the forms where offshore companies can be established. Or you have heard of Jebel Ali, where many offshore companies have been established. And since 2-3 years, it's also possible to set up special purpose vehicle companies in Abu Dhabi, in the Abu Dhabi global market, or in the DIFC. So here we have a list of the company forms or the relevant activities which fall under regulations. I would assume that banking insurance is not very important for many of the participants right now, because you assume you don't have a bank or an insurance company yourself. Perhaps you are a little bit in fund management, lease finances. Many often, of course, you have headquarters in some places, or holding companies. Perhaps you also have companies which are looking after intellectual property. And then we have distribution and service centers where we have businesses in various fields, like management consultancy firms as well. So these are things where you need to think, oh, do we really have the substance? Can we fulfill the requirements? And are we directed and managed in that jurisdiction? In my form, where I'm talking about is the UAE, United Arab Emirates. And do you have adequate number of qualified full-time employees? We have seen now that some jurisdiction, they say, well, it is a little bit difficult on a small island, perhaps with 30,000 inhabitants and 500,000 companies, to have substance for all those 500,000 companies. And some jurisdictions now offer and say, well, the service provider can give you some employees. But in the long term, I don't think this will work, because one employee should work for one company. It shouldn't work for 10, 20 or 100 companies. And then also you need to have an adequate amount of operating expenditure. You need to show that you really have expenses for the salaries and so on. And I would assume that this employee will not receive the salary of 50 or 100 companies. Or of course, although the person perhaps would be happy to receive it. Then you also have to have adequate physical assets. And what does that mean? Well, that means you need to have offices which reflect the importance of the company and where it has enough space to accommodate also the employees and the management. Now, all these problems, which are of course quite difficult to solve in smaller places where you have a limited amount of space for many companies, and fortunately, it is possible to migrate companies. We see a lot of people migrating around in the world, but now it's also possible that companies can migrate. They can migrate to a place which is perhaps more or better for them, because they have a better legal base, perhaps they have a better infrastructure, so it's possible to transfer companies. And this, of course, has plenty of advantages, because when you transfer a company from one country to the other, the bank account remains. And as we have seen today, or as everybody participating here, I'm sure you know, opening the bank account is the most difficult part of the business of setting up companies. Setting up a bank account, which perhaps in the last century took you 1 or 2 or 3 days, can now take 1 or 2, 3, not weeks, no, but months. It can take you a long time, and perhaps after 3 months they tell you, well, we cannot open the bank account, and you start from scratch with another bank. So there, with the migration of company, the main advantage is the bank account remains. So if you have a bank account with Credit Suisse in Zurich, and currently your company is somewhere in the Caribbean, and you move it now, for example, to Dubai, the bank account remains, just the address changes. What also is very important is that the contracts remain, so that you don't have to start new discussions about the contracts, how much is the commission and so on, which will be paid. The contracts remain, just the address changes. That, of course, is a great advantage. And the UAE has plenty of advantages because it has an excellent infrastructure. And looking at some of the participants of today, I've seen, or I know quite a few of them, they have been in the UAE, they have been in Dubai, they know the infrastructure in the last 20 years has developed tremendously. And what I'm also quite happy to see is, of course, Corona is a very big factor in our life, in our company life, as well as in our private life. What I'm very happy, I'm Swiss, I'm very happy that I'm stationed now in Dubai since 2004, because Dubai really handles this big crisis very good. And what I see also, that the tourism also is increasing, because many prefer now not to spend the winter time, or at least a part of it, not in Europe or in some Russian-speaking countries, but they prefer to go to Dubai, where life is quite normal. Well, of course, you have to wear a mask all the time, and if you don't do that, you will get a fine. But nevertheless, you can go to the beach, you can go to the shopping malls, and the restaurants are also open, but of course with some distancing and with wearing the mask. Only for drinking, and for eating you can take it off. Another advantages is the reputation of the UAE is increasing and is getting better every day. And very important is everybody is welcome. So if you migrate a company to the UAE, you don't have to go and see, well, do I find some Emiratis willing to work for me? No, you can bring your staff members, be they from the Ukraine, be they from Hungary or Kazakhstan or Latin America. Everybody is welcome. The population here is 90% are foreigners. Imagine, only 10% of the population are locals. And whether you are a foreigner or a local, all have the same advantages. You don't have to pay tax. And with no tax, I mean, you don't have to prove that you don't have to pay tax. That means you don't have to fill any tax revenue forms, nothing you have to do. The only tax which we have is the value added tax, and that is a very moderate one of only 5%, and it has been very well implemented and works quite well. Important also for all of us is that we have financial centers here, quite well established. We have the Dubai International Financial Center, and in Abu Dhabi, the Abu Dhabi Global Market, where we have international banks, asset manager, and all kind of providers of financial services. Important as well, when you move from one country to the other, is that how does it look like if you move with a family? Do you have some schools? Yeah, we have schools, and we have more than 200 private schools, whether you need a Russian-speaking school, French, English, and schools specialized for Latino languages, or everything we have here in Dubai, and everybody is welcome. And as you know, the airlines, they fly here. Emirates Airline and Etihad from Abu Dhabi, they fly now to many, many destinations. And they do that, of course, and show that they can bring tourists and business people back to the UAE, and the shopping facilities, and more of them all are open and working very good. Then perhaps, as you know, in the UAE, we have more than 30 free zones. And now with the migration of companies, you also have the possibility to upgrade a company. That means if you have an offshore company, you can upgrade it to become a free zone company. And by migrating this to the free zone, you have all the possibilities. You can also change the activity of the company. And this also is the same. If you migrate a company from the Caribbean, a typical offshore company, you can upgrade it in the UAE. You can have offices now, you can have employees, and all of them, they don't pay any tax. So definitely this is the main advantage which you can have. And you can have offices in a business center to real offices in real buildings, in real and big offices or for big companies, as well as smaller offices for smaller companies. When I said before, many countries have adapted substance rules. Please be aware that you really have to fulfill not only the substance rules of the country where the company is, but also consider where is that company doing business. For example, we had a company which had a flexi desk in Dubai in one of the free zones, but was very much working together with France. And when France said, well, it seems to me that you don't fulfill the substance rules of the real substance rules by having real offices, and a flexi desk is just not enough. In Dubai, it was possible to upgrade. We could make a real office out of it. And then it was everything okay, and everything was happy in France, and the company could cooperate and didn't have to pay any penalty. This, of course, would be very difficult in a typical offshore jurisdiction where this would be impossible to do. So what I would like to summarize, the main advantages are, above all, for me as well, that was the main reason that I moved in 2004 to Dubai, there's a zero tax regime. And very important, we have a network of tax treaties with over 80 countries. And when I say with over 80, I think in the meantime, I have to say over 90 countries. And very important, especially also for the Russian-speaking countries, there's also on the way to establish a double tax treaty with Israel. And that has been a real game changer. Now, about 2 months ago, not a tax treaty, but a peace treaty has been established, the Abraham Accord between the UAE and Israel, which opens up completely the whole horizon. Up to now, Israel was above all oriented towards the West, had business above all with the West, and the Arabic countries to the east, they couldn't really go because they had a difficult situation with them. Now, by having a peace treaty with the UAE, they can have now their office in Dubai or in Abu Dhabi or in one of the other Emirates, and do from those places business with countries, Algeria, with Morocco, with Iraq, which don't have a peace treaty with Israel. And that, of course, is a huge advantage. We also see that many Israelis want not only to do business with the UAE, but even think of moving to the UAE, because here they can have an apartment, a villa, near the beach, at the beach, for about 25 or a third of the price what they would pay in Tel Aviv. So they have plenty of advantages. And also when I look out now, we have nice temperatures here. During the night, perhaps 23 degrees, and during daytime, 30 degrees, as in Tel Aviv. In that area already starts to get a little bit colder. And there at this time of the year, most probably wouldn't like to go into the Mediterranean Sea. So all these are the advantages. Here there also is listed, of course, full repatriation of capital and so on. So you can bring everything back. And everybody of you who has been in this area, in Dubai, you also know the high quality of life, since everybody is welcome. And we have many clients, we have Russian-speaking clients, they don't speak English, and they say, well, we don't really have any big problems here because everybody speaks Russian as well. In the restaurants, in the hotels, they always have a person who speaks Russian. They have the menu in Russian. So that is a big, big advantage. So in summary, I can say that definitely the UAE is a great place to be. And what I also can say is that Bosco is also a great conference organizer, and they also have taken the steps. And 2 weeks ago, they had a very successful conference in Dubai with 100 persons physically attending. So the room was full with all distances of 2 meters between everybody, each person, and about nearly 300 people were participating online, as we have now also many online participants. So as you see, the UAE tries everything to be very comfortable and accommodate as many persons as possible. So that's my presentation, and I give it over to you. Igor's here, we see as well our offices in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai in the Swiss Tower.